We're talking technology and transportation today, all about what's happening with artificial intelligence and the Brightline rail service on this business backdrop. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Business Backdrop by Orlando Business Journal, sponsored by Edition Financial. My name is Richard Bobal, editor-in-chief of the Orlando Business Journal, and we have a great episode today where we're going to be tackling two different topics about artificial intelligence and transportation with the Brightline rail system going through Central Florida. But first, as always, we have to make a stop at our top headlines of the week. A grocery-anchored mixed-use project is in the works in Brevard County. The landing at Space Coast will anchor a 77,000 square foot retail space with a yet-to-be-announced grocery store. The project is along St. John's Heritage Parkway and Space Coast Parkway, adjacent to the 225-acre Space Coast Town Center master plan community. That area right now has been booming with the growth of NASA, Lockheed Martin, and other space development, and is driving up growth in the Melbourne area. And now we're going to head over to the west side of town. A developer is targeting the booming Villages area with a new restaurant and medical retail project. Orlando entrepreneur and developer James Ekbatani is building a restaurant and medical complex on the southeast area of the Villages in Lake County. A more than 4,500 square foot freestanding restaurant, a 3,800 square foot restaurant, and a one-story medical retail building of more than 14,000 square feet are all in the works at that site. Ekbatani purchased the Fruitland Park land for $1.45 million in February, and he plans about $2 million in infrastructure and another $3 million in construction. And for your sports fans out there, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy's founded sports venture is eyeing a downtown Orlando move. Tomorrow Sports will relocate 70 existing jobs and create 125 new positions in a move to downtown Orlando. The company said it's going to invest about $11 million in this move, but right now the address is still unknown. The company also said the average pay for these new positions is going to range about $150,000. Orlando currently ranks number 18th among the top 50 sports business cities in 2026, citing its neutral event hosting ability. That helps its attractiveness to sports industry businesses that are looking to come to the region. And that's pretty much our headlines. If you want to find out more about these stories, make sure to check OrlandoBusinessJournal.com. But now we're going to go into our next segment right after this word from our sponsor.
When it comes to meeting your short and long-term saving goals, you need a financial partner focused on helping you, not their bottom line. At Edition Financial, we see the real you. For more than 85 years, we've helped Central Floridians get the most for their hard-earned savings. Compare our saving rates to the big banks, and we think you'll like what you see. And with convenient money management tools and personalized guidance, we make saving easy. Edition Financial, exceptional banking for everyone since 1937.
And welcome back from our break. We're going to enter an interesting topic on artificial intelligence and how businesses are starting to get creative with it. And one of our big businesses in Central Florida is Walt Disney World, part of the Walt Disney Company. And there's been some news that's come out from Disney related to artificial intelligence. To help talk more about this, we've invited Dow Jones News reporter Kendall Asbury to talk a little bit more about it. Kendall, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
So you recently wrote a story on Disney and AI, but for the sake of it, can you recap a little bit about what the story was about?
So Disney came out last week to talk a little bit about their partnership with Adobe, a software company, and their partnership with their new technology, Firefly Foundry. So essentially, that is a generative AI building platform that uses a company or brand's internal content. So that's going to be intellectual property and branding guidelines to build their own generative AI model. So they came out and said that they're going to be implementing that in their theme park design and Imagineering processes.
So you talked already a little bit about it. What else did Adobe maybe say that they could use this technology for, especially Disney? Because I think Disney always trying to be cutting edge, and Adobe as a software provider always looking to help companies further stay on the cutting edge. But like, were there any examples that Adobe said Disney could use it for?
Yeah, for sure. So they emphasized a lot on the fact that this technology would be used to move concept to asset. So essentially what that means is accelerating production timelines and design processes, not necessarily using AI generated content, if that makes sense, but more so taking sketches to 2D models, 3D transformative models and things like that. So they're going to use they did know that they might use generative AI assets when it comes to franchised content or if they're trying to brainstorm some new content for a certain storyline or something like that. But mainly it's going to be used for that pre-production process of making their designs and sketches come to life.
Interesting. So, Disney, again, from someone who's covered Disney in the past, sometimes they don't really, they're always on the forefront of technology. They're always kind of welcoming the new stuff. So I'm always curious about what they've said with regards to this partnership. Did Disney share anything on their front, like the Imagineers, in terms of how they could use this AI system?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, something that was really interesting is they have noted that throughout their time as a company, they've always been readily able to partner with technology companies. So they even noted from NVIDIA to Meta, they have used a lot of different partnerships with these outside technology companies to really enhance what they're doing, especially from an Imagineering standpoint. But something that they mentioned about this partnership is that it would help bring Disney stories and characters to life faster. So they're partnering with an external company to kind of help that process. And Kyle Loughlin, the Senior Vice President of Research and Development for Walt Disney Imagineering, said that it was essentially to enhance human creativity and not replace it, because I know that is a really common concern when it comes to AI, especially in creative fields. So Disney wanted to make sure to emphasize the fact that they were hoping to enhance human creativity and make the design process more efficient for Imagineers rather than completely replacing the creative process. And the company also said that they've always believed in human creativity collaborating with technology. So they've always kind of been on the forefront of that, as you mentioned. So I think this partnership is really indicative of that. And they also explained a little bit further on how the generative AI system would have been used, because we talked a little bit earlier about possibly how the company was going to use it in terms of creating content and creating storylines. And since this will be an internal AI model, so it's based on the decades of Imagineering work, it will take the company's past work and the branding guidelines and everything like that to create newer content. So it all aligns with, the standards of the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. When you were reporting on the story, gathering the details, was there anything in your process that kind of piqued your interest when you were looking at it?
Yeah, I think something that is really interesting about this in particular is AI has pierced yet another creative industry, which is something that is really interesting when it comes to themed entertainment, because it somewhat seems as an area that's not as accessible to AI, right? You're talking about theme park experiences and tourism, and you're like, well, how can AI really be used in these facets? And I think that's something that was really interesting to me, because I think people didn't really kind of expect this development. And to my knowledge, Disney is the first theme park to really implement this, at least publicly. So I think that's something that's really interesting to see if other companies will follow suit. And I was especially interested in it because Disney has recently pledged to invest $17 billion into the Central Florida park. So I'm interested in how this comes into play.
Kendall, thank you again. Last question for you. Obviously, artificial intelligence is something we see a lot of our readers talk about, whether it talk about improving workforce development, efficiency, to your point, creativity. What is it about this tech maybe that you're watching closely as like a journalist, but also, someone that's keeping a close eye on the business community and how they adopt artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I would say I'm paying especially close attention to how the technology will be used, especially in related to creative assets. Are they going to really use AI? Are we going to start seeing AI generated storylines or characters and things like that? So I'm especially interested in keeping an eye on that. But I'm also to see if the technology actually boosts efficiency as they're hoping, or if it really will become a crutch for creativity, and if they'll rely on technology to kind of propel them forward in their creative assets. Kind of, we come back to that word, but that can mean anything from storylines to characters, and franchises and things like that. So I'm interested in seeing how that will come into play, and if it will really just boost productivity, or if it'll come back around and take creativity out of the hands of people who do it best.
Yeah, very good questions in terms of how we follow this technology moving forward. Kendall, thanks again for joining us and talking a little bit about this. And we'll be back with our next segment.
When it comes to meeting your short and long-term saving goals, you need a financial partner focused on helping you, not their bottom line. At Addition Financial, we see the real you. For more than 85 years, we've helped Central Floridians get the most for their hard-earned savings. Compare our saving rates to the big banks, and we think you'll like what you see. And with convenient money management tools and personalized guidance, we make saving easy. Addition Financial, exceptional banking for everyone since 1937.
And we're back to talk about our next segment about one of the region's most prominent transportation projects, the Brightline Rail. To talk a little bit more about it with us is Ryan Lynch, senior staff writer with Orlando Business Journal. Ryan, thanks for coming along.
Glad to be here.
So Ryan, Brightline has been in the news a lot lately, probably for some good news and some that they've wished could be better. Can you talk a little bit about what the current situation is with Brightline that you've been seeing and that we've kind of been following as a group of people who are really interested in Brightline?
Sure. And to kind of start off, they're obviously continuing to operate their connection between Orlando and Miami. They also operate between 5 stations in South Florida as well. And as they've been setting record ridership levels, they just hit 300,000 riders for the month of May in 2026. They continue to face challenges with their debt. They've delayed a bunch of payments tied to that debt, and they've been looking at bankruptcy financing as a potential option. They haven't said outright that they're going to do it, but experts I've spoken with have said that that is a potential pathway for them if they're considering that type of financing.
Mm-hmm. You know, bankruptcy, you and I have talked about this in the office. Bankruptcy can sometimes carry a huge negative connotation for a business, but it really depends on how that bankruptcy unfolds over time, where we've seen businesses successfully come out of it. So when you look at the overall coverage you've done with Brightline, in terms of keeping tabs of the ridership, how they've been very transparent in terms of the debt and the revenue, was this something that you kind of saw potentially becoming a reality where they would have been facing some kind of a reorganization or restructuring? And or did something change over the lifetime of it that you thought maybe played a bigger role now?
I think, and to kind of start, I know a lot of people, like you said, have that negative connotation of bankruptcy, but there can be a positive spin to it if they're able to, let's say, sort of refinance their debt and get some more favorable terms. Mm-hmm. And it does not mean that they're going to, we declare bankruptcy and immediately shut down. The type of bankruptcy they're looking at as a likelihood would likely mean they continue on. But looking at their initial financial picture, I don't think we necessarily saw this, right? There was a lot of rosy financial projections, but that also came pre-pandemic when they were trying to sort of predict where the world would be at then. Obviously, right. It took some time for them to build out the rail and actually get it up and running, and they're still trying to find that customer base here. I think the leisure traveler has definitely adapted to it pretty well, but they would say as much that they're still trying to break into that business environment and get more of those business travelers on Brightline versus taking other forms of transportation.
Right. What do you think? You've talked to some experts about this. What do you think might be the next thing to occur in this chapter right now related to this kind of restructuring financial pathway that they're doing?
I mean, I think there's still a lot of questions that remain. I know they continue to delay some debt payments as they're able to do. And part of that is just figuring out the strategy of what this would look like. A lot of the bankruptcy experts I've spoken with have said that their goal would not be to stay in a bankruptcy for a long time. I think one of them mentioned that the goal would be 120 to 150 days, just a quick process where you're able to kind of reinvigorate the business. You're able to stabilize a lot of things, figure out your debt picture, and go from there. Obviously, they have not declared, hey, we're going to do this at a certain point. So there's a lot of unknowns there. I think on the flip side, they're still looking at expansion in places like Cocoa. They're looking at the Sunshine Corridor, which would be a shared corridor with Sunrail, with destinations like the Convention Center and South International Drive. All those things are still kind of in progress. I know the Cocoa one, they're looking at federal funding for that. So they should know very soon whether or not they will get that type of funding. And then tied to the Sunshine Corridor, they're still waiting on a study to come back in 2027, which would have some more detailed estimates of what it would take to bring it there, including like what kind of federal investment they would need, what they would need to commit to something like that.
Yeah. Ryan, rail-based transportation, Central Florida, and I mean, arguably Florida as a whole is a big commuter drive. A lot of people own cars, but obviously there's a big push for alternative transportation. And we've had the growth here of Brightline. We've had the growth here of the Sunrail that connects several counties in Central Florida. But I've talked to some folks and a lot of people have differing opinions on how far along our rail infrastructure has gotten and how much of it has been adopted by people here. Some people are huge fans of it. They love the idea. Maybe they came from regions that have a better infrastructure, so they see the potential. Mm-hmm. But then there's other people who are, they see it, they see the potential in it, but because there hasn't been a ton of movement or growth, even for how long they've been operating, that they don't, for lack of a better term, they don't believe yet.
Sure.
And so, do you think it's a valid feeling for those folks who maybe are still on the fence on rail-based transportation in Central Florida? Or do you see something that they're not seeing as a potential?
I mean, I think it's fair at this point to kind of be like, hey, where is this looking? But I would say to those folks, like, if you're looking at the system as it is right now, obviously, Sunrail, it's a 62-mile system. Most of it follows I-4. And, there are a lot of places you can connect with, including downtown. But not all of Orlando lives or works in downtown. I think if they're able to make some of these connections to the airport, that allows them to run 7 days a week. And a lot of people would consider a rail option if it was available on the weekends. You think of going to events, you're like, man, I hate having to park near the Kia Center, or I hate having to park near Camping World Stadium. That provides another option that reduces the traffic into the area, but also allows some flexibility. People can still drive, but you give people the option of being able to, like, hey, maybe I want to have a couple of drinks and, take the train to the game, and that allows them to do that. So I think, people are justified in being skeptical of it, but if they're able to get that investment, that can kind of create the system we see in other markets where there is a lot more, you think of markets like DC, where you're able to connect with multiple airports in the same market through their metro system, and obviously a larger market. But if you look at other markets, you can really see what is possible if they're able to score some federal investment.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, last question. Obviously, we're going to keep an eye on Brightline, but what is it that you're going to be watching out for next as this kind of latest chapter unfolds?
Sure. I mean, tied to their expansion, I think we'll be looking at, whether they're able to secure some of that, because things like Cocoa will open them up to different markets. I think, Cocoa has close proximity to the cruise market. So that would add an additional customer base for them. On the side of the finances, I think we'll just continue to look at the documents and see, what direction they're going. A lot of the bond documents tend to point to what financial direction they're going, and they've been continuing to grow revenue and other things. Obviously, not at the level where it needs to cover their debt, but that is something we'll continue to watch and see, okay, are they trying to stabilize this revenue at a point where they can prove to people, hey, we got our debt load reduced, we're still making revenue, we're still able to do all the things we need to do as a company, now it's time for expansion. So I think looking at them trying to provide that continued stability for their business, if they're able to do that, that obviously bodes well for them in the future for a lot of the things they're trying to do.
Oh, sounds exciting. We'll keep tabs of it. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
So thank you to Kendall Asbury and Ryan Lynch for joining us and talking about what's going on both in the technology and transportation worlds of Central Florida. And that's a wrap for another episode. So a big thanks to our sponsor, Edition Financial, and a big thanks to you for joining us on this episode. So please make sure you like, subscribe, rate our show, and tell your friends about the business backdrop. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And as always, thanks for spending your time with us, and we'll see you next time.